Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to talk about how to look after your Christmas or Thanksgiving cactus after it's finished flowering. So your cactus should look similar to this after you've had a nice flowering display over Christmas time or Thanksgiving time. Now I'm lumping the two cacti together because they're very similar, and the Christmas cacti and Thanksgiving cacti come from a very similar part of the world in South America, Brazil, where they live in mountainous climates. They're very similar climate, they're just slightly higher or lower on the mountain, and because there's been so many different hybrids between the different species, they're not always truly different to each other. My plants are actually Thanksgiving cacti. I'll be talking about both, and I'll just tell you the differences as I go along about care. So the first thing you want to do is you want to remove all the old flowers. You can see on mine there's still quite a few that haven't fallen off naturally. Most of them will fall off by themselves, but if you've got quite dry air over Christmas time, which most houses do in winter, you might find that the flowers stick to the plant, so you'll need to remove them manually. You just want to be careful when you do this. So you can see I've got some here. All you want to do is just carefully pull them off. There shouldn't be any resistance because if they're completely dried up, they should pull off naturally very easily. So all you need to do is gently pull the flowers off, and if anything they will naturally knock off quite easily. So you just want to go around the whole plant and remove all of the flowers. That will just make it look much nicer, but also it allows more light to get into the plant, and it stops problems with rotting or disease setting in. If you leave all the flowers on, there's not as good airflow. You might have mildew problems or fungus problems later on. So once your plant's finished flowering, you've removed all the flowers. Next you need to think about the watering regime. So as I said before, these two types of cacti come from a very similar area, and where they live they have a dry season and a wet season. Now they grow in the southern hemisphere, so their summer is actually our winter, but all you need to know is after flowering you want to reduce the watering because they're coming into their dry season where they would come from naturally. So these are cacti, and although they're cacti, they do actually normally like high water levels, but being a cactus they can survive drought, and they do have seasonal drought where they come from. So what you want to do is reduce the watering. I normally allow my soil to completely dry out. I often stop watering for a whole month at a time, but you want to make sure you just give it a tiny bit of water every now and again over the winter period, and it needs that winter dormancy because it then lets the plant know it's gone through the winter period, it's coming into spring and it's ready to grow. If you don't give it the dormancy it needs over winter, it's less likely that you'll get flowering next year. So to give it a winter dormancy period, all you need to do is reduce the watering, allow the compost to dry out, and you probably want to water it about once a month or so, just enough to stop it drying out too much. If you do find that the leaves start to go a bit wrinkly or the plant starts to droop, then you just give it a little bit of water to help it perk up a little bit. And you can see with these two plants, the one at the front is looking just fine, the one at the back is looking a little bit dry, so that's an indication that the one at the back just needs a little bit more water. I'll let it dry out for too long. And you want to give this winter dormancy period around 3 months, so 3 months after flowering. So they normally flower in November, December time, depending on the type of cacti you have. And you want to start them to grow and increase the water again in springtime, usually around March when the light levels increase. So during this winter period, you want to give them similar temperatures to what they have in the wild. Now it's not too critical for temperatures, but with the two types there are slight differences. So with the Thanksgiving cacti, they actually live at lower altitudes, at around 700 to 1,000 meters in the wild environment. So they like slightly warmer temperatures. It is still a tropical climate though, so although they have winter, it's only very slightly different to their summer. So they like temperatures over winter between about 10 and 20 degrees Celsius. But you can go a little bit above or a little bit below that, it's not a big issue. And I've actually had these survive temperatures close to freezing and they've not really suffered too much. And when it comes to the Christmas cacti, they are slightly higher altitude at 1,400 meters to over 2,000 meters in altitude. Although they are in the subtropics or the tropics, they do have quite a lot lower temperatures. Would naturally be around 5 to 15 degrees Celsius, which is quite a bit cooler than most households. But if you just put it on a cool windowsill, even if it is close to 20 degrees, it should be okay. But just try and put it in a cooler location if you can. Don't give it too much heat. And when it comes to lighting for both of them, you want to put them in a bright windowsill. It depends where you are in the world, but if you're living in a part of the world which has winters and they're quite dark, then you want to put them on a south-facing window, give it as much light as possible. Just avoid maybe some midday sun, but a little bit of direct sun in winter is fine. If you're living in a country which does get quite a lot of sun, maybe Mediterranean, subtropical or tropical climate, then you want to keep it away from any sunshine. Just put it on a bright windowsill with indirect light. And when it comes to light levels for the two of them, the Christmas cacti can handle a little bit more light than the Thanksgiving cacti. Thanksgiving cacti They really don't like much light at all. If you give it too much light, you'll get this purple effect, which you can see on my one at the back. So if you see a purpling of the leaves, and you'll probably also notice a reduced growth rate, that's normally a sign that it's had too much light. They're very sensitive to light. These normally grow as epiphytic plants on the trunks of trees or on rocks underneath a forest canopy, so they don't like any direct sunlight, and if they have too brighter light levels, they can have this purple effect. This one has actually not been in direct sunlight, but it's been in extremely bright indirect light, and that has caused that purpling effect. When you come into springtime, avoid any direct sunlight if you can, and make sure that if you do have indirect light, it is fairly bright but not very bright indirect light. So you want to have it a little bit away from the window, not with really high light levels, otherwise you will get this purpling effect. When it comes to the Christmas cacti, however, you can give that as bright a light level as you want, as long as it's indirect light. You can probably also give that a tiny bit of sunlight first thing in the morning or last thing in the evening, and it should be okay. But again, if you see any purpling effect on the leaves, they are technically stems as they are cacti, then you just reduce the light level slightly and it should do better. And then when it does come to spring, when it comes to watering, just keep them damp at all times. They don't like to dry out completely. It's surprising, although they are cacti, where they come from in the wild, they get very high rain levels and it's constantly raining down the trunks onto their roots, so they don't like to fully dry out. Just allow them to just get slightly drier than damp. It's kind of hard to explain, but don't allow the compost to fully dry out in between waterings, but don't keep it wet the whole time. Make sure it's a free draining compost mix and the water can really drain out so it doesn't get wet. Because they're normally growing on tree trunks or on the surface of rocks, although they get rained on a lot, the water also drains off very quickly. So it really does need to be a free draining mix. And when it comes to temperatures, they need a warmer temperature, but it's a very stable environment where they live in the wild. Because it's a subtropical climate and it's high altitude, the temperatures between summer and winter aren't massive. So fortunately for us, for most households, temperatures are perfect. So with the Thanksgiving cacti, it's 20 to 30 degrees is their optimum temperature, but they are quite resilient to different temperatures. So anything above 20 should be fine, and anything a little bit above 30 wouldn't be too bad, but ideally keep it below 30 degrees Celsius. When it comes to the Christmas cacti, they do grow much higher up in the mountains, so they can handle as cooler temperatures 15 degrees over summer, which for most of us isn't a problem because they're going to be much warmer than that. But their maximum's around 25 degrees Celsius. You can go up to 30, but they're not going to grow quite as well. If you can keep it under 25, they're going to be happy. So around the 20 degrees Celsius mark for Christmas cacti, and then around the 25 degrees Celsius mark for Thanksgiving cacti, and you got 5 or 10 degrees leeway either side, but ideally keep it at that steady temperature if you can. So that's all for this video. I just wanted to quickly let you know how to look after your Christmas or Thanksgiving cacti once it's finished flowering, and you can look after it then into over winter and into spring. If you want to know how to encourage it into flowering the next year, I have done a previous video about that, and it goes into a bit more depth about the care of the cacti. You can find that now at the end screen.